Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story: Wendigo's Spirit Long-Lost Journal of a Viking Explorer. Last year, I was hiking with a buddy of mine in the woods in eastern Newfoundland. For those who don't know, it's in the far eastern part of Canada. We are both originally from the Vancouver and have been avid hikers and campers for many years, traveling to all parts of Canada and currently working on our visas to America actually. While we were on a 2-day hiking trip camping where we saw fit, we stumbled off path as we thought we saw a cave farther off into the distance. After about 3 to 4 minutes of walking off the dirt path into the woods, we approached it, and indeed it was a cave. Knowing that caves are super neat, but also very dangerous for many reasons, we just looked around for a bit before deciding if we should check inside if it's clear or not, as it would make a good spot to have camp for the night. Caves are home to many animals ranging small to large, bears, wolves to name a couple of the more dangerous animals to be exact. We eventually grabbed our flashlights from our backpacks and entered the cave entrance cautiously. The cave was pitch black, and once we had walked inside, noticing how deep it actually was. From the outside, it looked like a 6 to 7 foot wide opening with about a 5-foot ceiling. But once you stepped inside, it had a good open space, I'd guess to be about 15 by 15, which was more than enough space for the two of us to set up camp and get a fire going for the night. In the back of the space was what looked like a small pathway of some sort. It was narrow and looked like the earth cracked it just enough for someone to walk through it. Where it led, we had no clue, and I wasn't really wanting to find out at that moment. We were tired, looking to rest, and didn't feel like venturing off into the uncharted cave deeper and risking falling or getting hurt or stuck, or God knows what else happens to people in caves. There was a faint water dripping noise down that dark pathway which echoed throughout the cave. Sounded spooky to me, but then again, maybe there's some fresh water nearby we can collect for tomorrow hike, I told my buddy. Once we set up our things, I told him I'd go check it out and see if I could find the source of the water, as I held out water containers in my now empty pack and my flashlight in my right hand. The pathway was twisted and narrow, and honestly it was just better that I went alone, plus I doubt my bud would have went with me anyways. He was tired as hell and was just ready to eat and go to sleep. I tucked and squeezed myself through with my pack and eventually found the source of the water after a minute or so walking deeper into the cave system. This cave kept going and going. I could see further ahead, but I found the source thankfully not too far in. There was a small stream that flowed down the rocky surface wall into a small puddle-like area, then disappearing into the rocks and earth. As I shunned my flashlight around, I happened to come across a pouch of some sort which was made of animal fur. I thought it was an animal at first and stood frozen in my tracks. I walked over to the fur ball and grabbed it. I realized the fur was just wrapped around something flat and hard in its center. As I looked, it seemed to have unraveled an old as hell-looking leather book of some sort. I was really memorized about the find, but then realized how thirsty I was and took care of filling up our water containers first and bring this book and fur back with me back to our little campsite at the cave entrance. Once I got back, my friend had already gotten the fire going, which felt really nice as I sat down handing him his water. The night was on its way out with the sun starting to set. I told my friend about the book and let him take a look at it. He was always the history buff anyways, I just liked video games and hot chicks. He told me that this journal looked really old and is really surprised it in the shape that it's in. He pointed to the off shapes that were on the cover and on parts of the pages on the inside. They looked like runes, he mentioned. I didn't recall what runes were, and he told me that in fact that was the way of communication writing back in the Viking days. As he read, I mumbled to himself, "Dude, this is written in English, which is odd unless this person or Viking traveler was educated or had traveled more than most." He read on for a few minutes and told me to check it out as it mentioned this cave on one of the pages. He handed me the book and he laid back onto his mat and started to relax. I, on the other hand, was totally excited. Not only did I just find some ancient Viking journal in some cave in the middle of nowhere, but it was readable too. "This has to be worth some money," I said to him. He opened his eyes and just replied, "Dude, just read it or go to sleep." I smirked at him and I laid my back up against the side cave wall and started to read the notes from inside this journal. "If you are finding this journal, that means I am dead. My name is Bjorn Erling and the year is 1004 AD. I do not know the exact date of these entries as I have been stuck here in this cave for some time now. Our ship had arrived to the shores of this newfound land several weeks prior to these entries. There was 40 of us in total, and have built a small village right off the shore past the wood line. We have an altercation with the natives of this land, as they do not speak any language that I have heard before. They attacked our fort on the second week we are here. Several of our members have died, and most of theirs too in the process. We can't seem to communicate properly with them, and they keep attacking in the middle of the night, and we are trying our best to bessen our defenses. We have built walls around our village, but they always seem to find a way inside, picking us off one by one. They're not big people, quite small in fact, but there are many, and our next ship isn't due here for another week or more. I was out hunting with a brother of mine in these woods. We went deeper than we have been as our people are hungry, and we needed meat. The sun was dim, and the colors above were quite pleasant to see when it was visible from all the trees overhead. We started hearing noises echoing around us in the woods. Not knowing what they were, we followed them. No sense at turning back. These sounds would have already startled off any catch we may have been tracking. As we continued deeper and deeper into the woods, the noises and snapping sounds became louder. We had no idea what was in store for us at the time, but we had to investigate. During our proustite, that when we both heard a familiar-sounding voice speaking to us, it sounded like one of our other Viking brothers back at the village that had gone missing during one of the attacks for the natives. Bjorn, help me. They have me trapped here, and I cannot escape. My brother screamed, by Odin, where are you? Silence. The voices didn't reply. I gripped my sword handle on my waist, and my brother held his bow with a firm grip. Do you think that was really Kinjo? I don't know, I replied, but we need to find out either way. It sounded like him. We heard our brother speak again, but this time it spoke to use twice, but from different directions in front of us. Levi, why did you not help me in the village? Hurry, I don't have much time. My brother Levi ran off to the left and motioned with his arm pointing for me to follow the other sound to the front right from our location. I nodded and readied my sword. After we had split up, I started to have a feeling of dread, and airy feeling was washing over me. This felt off. None of this seemed right. The natives didn't speak our language, and that voice did sound like our brother Nook, but it was off in a way too. Not soon after, that's when I heard the screaming of Levi. Rushing back in the direction I saw him walk to, I hurried as fast as I could, no longer caring about keeping the silence as I ran and screamed out to him, trying to find his whereabouts. Farther in the distance is when I saw it. I cannot even call it a man. It was some kind of forest creature. It was skinny like it was starting, and shaped like a man from what I could muster. Its long arms clawed my friend, dragging his now lifeless body further into the dark woods. This creature had antlers on its head like some kind of deer. We have gods like this back home. Had they followed us here to this new land and now punishing us for becoming Christians? I was in total shock, but there was no choice in the matter, and I was losing sight of them in the dark now, and there was a good distance still between us. I ran as fast as I could, but even in doing so still couldn't keep up with this creature dragging Levi. I picked up his bow off the grass along the chai and ended up finding this cave on this hillside. I just knew that creature had taken my brother into that cave. There was nowhere else in eyesight where it could have gone and disappeared to. Once in the cave, I explored as much as I could after making a makeshift torch with some fabric from my clothing on a nearby stick I had found. The space was tight. I found the bloody drag marks right away, so my hunch was correct. Levi was brought somewhere inside this cave system. I had gotten lost a couple of times within this cave. It is more than meets the eye, but always seem to find my way back to the water source as the constant dripping which echoes the labyrinth halls leads me back to here. I cannot leave him. I cannot leave my brother. I must avenge him and place his bow in his hand, so that the Valkyries may take his soul to heaven or Valhalla to meet his family in paradise forevermore. I'm writing this all down with the best of my knowledge in case I do not make it back out of this cave from which I ventured. Someone must know what happened to us. Someone must be led aware of this creature out in the woods. I hear my brother calling me now far off, echoing off somewhere in this cave. I must end this log for now. If I return, I will update what I find. Goodbye for now. That was the last thing written in this journal. The rest of the pages were blank. Dude, wake up. I have to tell you something. Second story. Creepy creature in my house. I was 14 at the time. I was visiting my dad. I would go back and forth from my parents. My dad lives on a farm. We have a pretty average-size farm with a barn, shed, a bunch of farming equipment and silos. Now we are literally in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. The closest town to our house was around 60 miles. Believe it or not, we actually had two neighbors a couple miles down. I'm going to give you the lay of the land. We have a long driveway connecting to the main road. When you pull in, it takes around 30 seconds to go to the house, driving at a comfortable 20 miles per hour. Once you pass the gate, we have immediate left, we have the shed that holds our shop. Then going back to the gate, if you look straight ahead from it, that is our barn and a bunch of garages for our farming equipment. Then lastly, we have 4 silos going across that. Then to your immediate right when you enter the gates is our house. Our house is actually not that big compared to other farmhouses. It's a 2-story house, but it's quite small. If you take a right from the gate, you will meet a screen door. If you enter that screen door, you will immediately be hit with a big table. If you look to your right from where you entered, that's the living room, and then inside that living room in the back is a spare room where I slept. If you take a left instead of taking a right, you will meet a section where there's a bunch of rooms. If you stand in the middle of that section, to your left will be the kitchen, and then to your right there's a bathroom, a computer room, and my dad's room. There is one door that leads up to the second floor, but it's basically just an attic because we barely go up there as it's freezing cold up there. Once you enter the kitchen, if you take a right in the corner, we have the basement, and then the entranceway where you enter from the front door. But anyways, let's get with the story. So like I said, it's just me and my dad at that house. It was any other average day. I woke up from the room and want to go eat breakfast. My dad, a hardworking man, woke up extremely early. He would never wake me up, but I liked eating breakfast with him. But that being said, as I woke up and went into the living room, I couldn't help but feel I was being watched. I know, really ironic, but have you ever had that feeling where you feel really uneasy or nervous? But usually when that happens, you just brush it off, and that's exactly what I did. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed some bacon and eggs and ate and talked with my dad. Me and him laughed, but when we were done, he went outside to go work on his truck, and I stayed inside and watched TV for a bit. Now, even with me being 14 years old, I was pretty strong mentally. Honestly, I rarely got scared, but what happened next was something that could have never been prepared for me. So I was sitting in my living room, when out of the blue I heard this absolutely massive bang right above me. I about my pants. I jumped so bad I actually fell out of my chair and spilled all of my water. It sounded like somebody just got dropped off of a skyscraper. I looked up almost immediately thinking there would have been a hole in the ceiling, but there was nothing. At that point I knew there was absolutely no way something would have fallen up there, as there is nothing in that room. Remember how I told you we never went up there? Well, the only thing in that second floor was right next to the stairway. When you entered, it had nothing else. So essentially either something was up there, or the roof just fell on top of itself. And that house was dead silent after that. I muted the TV and sat in this frozen state, wondering if I should even walk for a couple minutes. Luckily, I seen my dad walking back into the house, but it wasn't over. As I didn't want to go investigate it, I just thought I should lock the door. But as I was walking over, I eerily heard some type of crying, or some asterisk like that. It was literally right next to that door. Me being a 14-year-old, my head was rushing through horror movies. I locked that door in and sprinted the hell out of that house. My dad was halfway walking. I immediately ran to him, telling him what was going on. Now, my dad was a jokester, and usually around with me when I did something like this. But I'm just assuming he probably saw the fear in my face and went in there. Now, this time we didn't go through the screen door and instead went through the front door. He opened the door and immediately took a left. For reference, when you open the front door and take a left, we have a hidden gun in case of an intruder. He grabbed his Glock 19, and we walked into the kitchen. I was a little behind because I was scared to walk in there, but then I realized something. The basement door sure as hell was not open, as I went to go check to make sure it was shut, because the heat from the basement was immense. It's from our furnace, because usually basements aren't hot. I didn't think much of it though, maybe thinking my dad opened the door. Me and my dad both went to his room right next to the door I locked, and this is where I connected 2 and 2 together. The door was literally swung wide open and the lock was busted off. By the way, those locks were designed to hold shed doors shut in case of the storm. As a matter of fact, the door was literally leaning on the wall as the hinges were blown off. My dad just took a little peek at me, and then my entire life I've never seen him look so worried ever. My dad was a former police officer for 1 year, so he added some training. He taught me how to shoot a gun, and I've hunted my whole life. So he handed me a gun also. This might sound like something out of Call of Duty, but I actually cleared out the living room in my room. I did it, and went back to him whispering to him that I did it. Now at that point he was at the basement door. As I entered the kitchen, I saw him sitting in fear. I asked him what was wrong, and to my horror, he heard somebody whispering and crying down there. My dad took a quick look at me and said, "We're going down there," and I agreed. Each step was horrifying enough. Let me tell you how the basement is set up. Once you reach the bottom step, which is about 10 steps, to your right we have a workout place. And then to your left you have the washing machine and an additional bathroom with a shower. Now in the left corner we have a boxed out room. It's like one of those creepy trapdoors you would see in movies. We've only been in there once. It's maybe 8 foot tall and 15 feet wide. So as we reached halfway, we could hear some blatant shuffling. We checked the right and the left place, but didn't see anything. I already knew that whatever or whoever was in this house was in that place. My dad reluctantly posted up by it and signaled me to go to the other end. By the way, the basement is almost pitch black because we didn't turn any lights on. The only light source was illumination from the sunrise, which wasn't enough. As my dad entered, I entered behind him reluctantly, that we were maybe 2 steps into the room when my dad tried looking for the light switch when we heard this absolutely horrifying screech come from the corner. My dad pushed me and told me to go to the other end while he went to the other end. We heard this screeching crying away from the corner, and it got progressively closer and closer as time went on. To my dismay, I could see it. That thing was tall. Its head had to lean under because it was hitting the ceiling. We're talking 8 foot tall. What made it even worse was this thing was really ripped. It straight up looked like a bodybuilder. Now, since it was pitch black, I could only see it because of the illumination, not being able to see my dad. It walked out and started walking up the stairway when my dad appeared. We stepped out and my dad was ready to yell when it completely booked it out of the basement. I heard a loud slam and then some more yelling. My dad and I walked up the stairway very reluctantly. Now on the 5th step before we entered the kitchen again, my dad stopped. He whispered himself, "Holy F asterisk 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 dollar hit." I told him what and went to the side of the stairway and saw that the door was blown 30 to 40 feet away from where it's supposed to be. The whole doorway was completely ripped off. But oddly enough, it was still standing in the doorway. My dad was about ready to shoot the thing when it sprinted, I would say 30 miles per hour in almost a second. My dad ran right up the stairway and tried chasing it, and I was quickly following behind him when we saw it disappear in the cornfield. We immediately contacted the police, and it took them 45 minutes to get out there. They scanned and surveyed the area for hours and found absolutely nothing besides the evidence they had. We even checked the security cameras, but oddly enough, it wasn't working at that time. It's been a while since that's happened, and I haven't seen that thing in a while. If anyone can tell me what that thing is, I would love to know. Third story. My first and only hunting trip with my grandfather. My grandfather died a few months ago, and I felt that, in order to properly honor his memory, I needed to share this tale. I have a lot of stories about him, but I felt this was the one that was most important. He made me the man I am today. When I was growing up, I would spend summers at my grandparents' home in northern Washington. Their home was surrounded by a forest with nothing but a small dirt trail leading in and out. They lived around 5 hours outside any town, so we mostly had fish, game, and whatever they were growing that season. The majority of the time I spent there was spent fishing, gardening, or listening to my grandfather's tales from when he was a young man in Ireland. On my 14th birthday, he took me hunting for the first time. I gathered our bags and hunting bows and met him out front. He took his gear and handed me a small sprig from the blackthorn tree out back. Back in Ireland, he would keep them on him as a way to ward away evil spirits and take some with him every time he leaves the house. I figured it was just something he did as a sort of good luck charm, like a rabbit's foot. I tucked it into my back pocket and we set out on his normal hunting trail. It was nearly night before we set up camp. He was an old-fashioned camper, no tent or sleeping bag for him. He would only ever bring a blanket, pillow, and a fire steel. Once everything was set up, not that it took very long, he started telling another story from Ireland. A few hours and a meal of jerky and bread later, we went to sleep. I woke up a few hours before sunrise. The forest was never particularly loud, especially compared to our home in Seattle, but that night it was as if someone had muted everything. The fire had burned down to ash, and the night was lit by nothing but a small crescent moon, just enough to see it by. A dark figure stood just beyond the tree line, staring into the camp at me. I had never felt as terrified as I was that night. I had no idea what it was. It looked too tall for a human, and it made no sound as it started towards me, inching its way through the brush. I was frozen, too scared to move or even blink. I could just barely see the moon's glint in its eyes as it crossed the boundary into our makeshift camp. They were deep and dark, a terrible hunger in them. The closer it got to me, the more of it I could make out. Its body was tall, but emaciated. Arms too long for its body, pulled close to its chest, tipped with several inch-long claws. It swayed and stumbled as it walked, never quite getting close enough to fall. It stopped a few feet from me, the hideous globes of its eyes never moving from mine. Just as it raised its arms and lunged for me, the sharp sound of an arrow zipping by broke the silence. It pierced into the beast's throat, covering the ground and its onyx flesh with blood. Its horrible scream rang through the night, breaking the hold my fear held on me, and I scrambled away from it. I hit something warm and solid behind me, but before I could even register that I'd stopped, a familiar hand on my shoulder threw me to the side, and my grandfather rushed the beast, a bright white blade in his hand. The beast burned as his blade cut into it, the smell of burning flesh adding to the metal scent in the air. All in all, it had only lasted a minute or so between when I first saw it and when it lay on the ground, an unmoving mass of flesh and mottled, black fur. My grandfather said it would be too dangerous to leave before then, but even more so to stay another night. We packed our bags up again, ate a small meal, and waited for daybreak. We headed back as soon as the sun came up. Before we left, I noticed something odd. My grandfather's sprig of blackthorn was tied around the arrow in the beast's throat. That was the last time we visited them for years. Fourth story. The Weirs Beach Wendigo. Before June 28, 2019, I was an avid urban explorer. I would always look down back roads for abandoned houses and soon-to-be torn-down barns. I'm also a photographer by trade, so naturally I brought my camera along with me to capture the experience. So when my grandfather invited me up to his summer lake home in the White Mountains, I was gleeful. Not because of the mountain scenery or the private lake with multiple jet skis. No. I was giddy at the thought of being able to explore one of my most sought-after abandoned destinations, Surf Coaster. Surf Coaster was a massive abandoned water park about 2 miles from Weirs Beach. The park covered about 10 square miles and was rumored to be the urban explorer's paradise. I arrived at the nearest public parking lot, a Cumberland Farms, at around 6:40 p.m. I used my phone to see a topographical satellite view of the large abandoned parking lot of the water park. I was led down a few side streets and back roads until I saw the sign. Hidden among vines and bushes was a blue sign with yellow-tinted bulb lights surrounding it that said Surf Coaster. Next to it was a rusted and rather puny 2-foot-high gate with a faded, "No Trespassing" sign. I'll pretend I didn't see that. Stepping over the obstacle, I was presented with a parking lot with a few scattered 80s-looking hatchbacks and sedans. They were rusted with their windows smashed in and graffiti plastered all over them. The parking lot stretched about 70 feet in front of me and then stopped to another fence. To my right there was a wooden fence, and to my left down a step hill was an urban explorer's dream. Water slides covered with ivy and moss, pools filled with deflated inflatable toys, and sunning chairs with towels still on them. As I started down the embankment, I stopped at what must have been the ticketing booth. Inside the ajar door was a small room consisting of a chair with a comb on it, an open cash drawer underneath the counter, and a roll of tickets behind the chair. As I stepped inside, I noticed something in the open cash drawer. It was money. Water-damaged money. I gentled, picked up a 50, and held it up to the golden hour sunlight to see the blue security strip running down the bill. It was real. Why in the world would the company leave money at their closed park? I thought to myself. Placing the bill back in the drawer, I continued down the hill. The next 2 hours were fairly standard for urban exploring. Chipping paint, dirty water, rotting wood, all except for one small detail. The towels. On most the lounge chairs by the large pool were people's towels. as if they had just left them. I thought nothing of it and ignored it. After I had seen the last enormous moss-covered water slide, I only had one more place to go: the bathrooms. Now at this point in my adventure, the sun had already set, and a cool breeze was making the hairs on my arms stand up. As I traversed the crumbling pool deck to the hillside bathrooms, I noticed something odd: the bathroom doors. The doors were rusted steel with large locks on them. When I got there, I was right. Large rusted locks were holding the bathroom doors shut. But why the bathrooms? I wanted to explore them, but they were built into the hillside and were mostly underground, so there was only one entrance. As I looked around for a rock or some heavy object to try and dislodge the locks, I realized that the ground surrounding the bathrooms were scattered with bullet shells. They were still shiny, and using my scarce weapon knowledge, they looked to be .30 caliber rounds. My stomach turned as the park could actually be closed due to an active shooter or terrorist. Wouldn't that have been on the news? I mean, that's a big deal. I settled myself, as they could have just as easily been rounds fired by some rednecks who used the water park as their gun range. It was New Hampshire after all. I soon found a rusted fire extinguisher and successfully knocked the men's room lock off. Inside was an assortment of more towels, swim goggles, duffel bags, and dried-up sunscreen bottles. The whole room smelled like vinyl for some reason, and I could barely snap a few pics before bolting out of there. Odd that they would lock that up, but it could serve as a home for homeless people or drug dealers. I was just going to skip the women's room, assuming it would be more of the same. But then the thought hit me: what if it was something else? What if it was the same? I had to know. After retrieving the fire extinguisher from the bush, I knocked off the second lock and opened the heavy door. A blast of air hit me. There were two things wrong with that air. One was the fact that it made me as cold as I had ever been, and that it smelled like a rotting animal. I stepped out of the way to let myself warm up for a few seconds. I saw a good photo opportunity there with both doors open, so I took it. Setting my shutter speed to capture the light just right, I was about to take the photo when through the viewfinder I saw something that made my blood curdle: movement from inside. There was a grayish-brownish movement coming from inside. I dropped my camera and froze in fear. The faint lighting the full moon gave was enough to reveal the creature that slowly emerged in front of me. It was crouched down to fit inside the doorway, so I could only guess it was 9 feet tall. Its face was that of a wolf, and it had teeth that jutted out of its lips. Large green deer antlers topped its head, and its fur was greasy and slimy, like that of a dog's saliva, and as started at it, it let out the most terrifying sound I have ever heard. Its wail was high-pitched and raspy at the same time. Adrenaline rushed through me as I turned to run back up the cracking stairs to the hill. My feet pounded on the moist soil as I neared the parking lot. I glanced over my shoulder, and only then could I see the complete mass of the creature. It had to be at least 10 feet tall, and its strides on all fours told me I had to run faster than I had ever run before if I wanted to live. So I did. I ran all the way back to the main road and all the way to the gas station, all while listening to its ear-piercing wails grow farther away. I practically dived in my car and nearly stalled it trying to peel out. I drove the 2-hour journey back to Lincoln with my foot to the floor most of the ways. Even though I'm back in civilization, I still don't feel safe, and I regret going there. I also regret dropping my camera. So if anyone wants a Canon 1DX, check the abandoned bathrooms at Surf Coaster, but beware of the Weirs Beach Wendigo. Fifth story: the woods of Kentucky. I just got back from a camping trip on my family's land out in western Kentucky, and I will probably never go back after something stalked us for 2 nights and ultimately made us tear through the dense woods in a panic that cannot be understood until you have been hunted by something that you know is far beyond your comprehension. Something that ancient medicine men and old wives whisper about, throwing glances over aged shoulders to peer into the darkness while leaning forward into the protection of the light of the fire. There were 6 of us out this weekend: myself and my wife, our super tactical friend Matt, our heavyweight tank of a man friend Sam, my not really a fan of the outdoors friend Jeremy, and his outdoor-loving girlfriend Chelsea. For some background, Matt and I are gun nuts, so we were both carrying pistols, even though there isn't really anything in the woods of Kentucky that we need them for. I also had my AR-15, and Matt brought his October 22nd. We arrived at the property at 8 p.m., just as it became pitch black, so we had to make camp in the dark. Not a big deal, just throw on a headlamp and get to setting up camp, starting with the fire. The campsite was a cleared-out area, with some trees on the edges, then it gets into the denser woods. Since we had our hammocks, my wife and I had to set up farther away from the fire, which was in the center of the clearing. It was unnerving to see the shadows of our friends, cast by the roaring fire, dance against the trees while we set up our hammocks. We set them up quickly, but due to the general creepiness of the situation, I didn't notice my wife occasionally pausing to look back into the woods and watching for the movement that she later told me she caught out of the corner of her eye. After setting up our camp, I realized that I had left my jacket back in my car, and Matt wanted to go check out a pond nearby. So we decided we would head out together and hit both the cars and the pond. I grabbed my AR and Matt grabbed his October 22nd to go play Mall Ninja in the woods on the way. We handed Sam a radio and made sure we were on the same frequency and headed out. Started out very tactical, but after we got a good distance into the woods, the cars and pond were both in a clearing through about 300 yards of woods. We both were getting a little nervous. I don't think we realized just how dark it was out there. We stopped bounding and covering each other from imagined Chinese paratroopers and started walking together, rifles down, making as little noise as possible. At first we didn't really know why, but then we stopped and listened. Nothing, absolutely no sounds, no wind, no bugs, nothing. We looked at each other, and even though we couldn't see each other's eyes, we knew what we were thinking. All the damn Inuwood's threads on /K/ had prepared us for this moment. We knew what we had to do. I acted first, putting a palm on the back of Matt's neck, and shoved him firmly, simply being able to articulate the word, "go," under my breath. He pushed forward through the growth headlong, and I did my best to keep my hand on his back and ignore the thought in the back of my mind, slowly pushing its way forward and filling my chest with terror and rising into my throat. We broke out of the woods into the clearing and made it to the cars breathing heavily. We both put our backs against my SUV and pointed our rifles into the woods, expecting something to burst after us. After 20 seconds, Matt expressed my thoughts. Something was running behind us, right? I stopped breathing when he said it, because before I had attributed it to my imagination, but a third party now confirmed that something was chasing us and was now between us and the camp. I called Sam on the radio. "Sam, did anyone else leave camp to follow us?" "Nope, we are all here still." "Shit." I opened the car and reached in to grab my jacket and also got a flashlight while Matt continued staring at the woods, looking for the slightest sign of movement. I turned back around and turned the light on the woods. Nothing, blessed nothingness. But now we had to get back into the woods to get to camp. After 5 minutes to discussing it, we decided that it had just been our imagination, if only just to get the courage to re-enter those haunted woods. Flashlight in hand, I gripped my rifle and slogged in, Matt's hand firmly encouraging me firmly, with him watching behind us. The walk back was uneventful, but at the sight of the fire we hurried our pace even faster before re-entering the safety of the clearing. After we broke out of the woods, we broke formation and quietly agreed under our breath not to mention anything to the group. Silence, unfortunately, seemed to fail, as we were both uncharacteristically quiet. Not to mention that we had not had time to see the pond, and the group was curious about our radio call. So I told them what had happened. 3 chuckled and made fun of 4chan for making up ghost stories, but Chelsea listened intently. Later on she asked if any of us had read the books Missing 411 or the Native American studies of Dr. George Marlin in his book Rights of the American Indian. None of us had, but she told us that Missing 411 documented many strange and unexplained disappearances in America, and ROAI is an old, out-of-circulation book she found at the library when she was a kid that confirmed many things that /K/ and /X/ said of the occult in the wilderness, more or less. Everyone quieted down at that and stared into the fire. I remembered reading on /K/ that white ash kills skinwalkers, and since I was a paranoid motherfucker, I thought it might be worth it to dip my hollow points into the white ashes in the fire. Chelsea told me not to bother. It needs to be the ashes of white oak trees per Dr. Marlin. Well, damn. My wife spoke up after a few minutes of silence and told us about how she thought she had seen something moving in the woods when we were setting up our hammock. At this point, we were all pretty on edge. Every once in a while we would shine lights into the forest, but never actually saw anything. Around midnight, we decided to call it a night. As I lay there in the hammock, I couldn't help but listen to the rustling around our hammock and gripping my M&P tighter and wondering if that sound is really just the wind. The next day was relatively uneventful, and in the midst of the sun and clouds and changing leaves, the horror of the previous night was forgotten. We went and shot guns, chopped down a tree to make seats for the campfire, and just enjoyed the cool fall air. However, instead of shooting all the ammo I brought for the trip, I decided to keep one full mag for my AR and my M&P. Dusk fell, and we sat around the fire to cook our hot dogs. Emboldened by the sunlight and full bellies, we taunted the spreading darkness and challenged the spirit of the Wendigo, which unnerved Chelsea and made me instantly regret my decision. Matt, however, was emboldened and walked around camp with his rifle slung, talking about how he hoped to get to be the first/K/Omando to slay a skinwalker. As the sun finally set, we built up the fire, double-checked our wood supply, and settled in for what we hoped would be a relaxing evening. About an hour after the sunset, we had finished making s'mores when the echoing howls of coyotes started. We were unconcerned, since we know that it is extremely rare for coyotes to attack people, but then the cows in a field in the opposite direction started bellowing as the wind picked up a bit, blowing piles of fallen leaves across camp and bringing into our nostrils the scent of decaying lichen and a touch of rotted meat. Jeremy nervously suggested that perhaps the coyotes had found a kill. Matt, filled with newfound confidence, wanted to go looking for them. I didn't want to go. I really didn't want to go, but I am way too loyal for that shit, so I followed him into the godforsaken woods to look for the coyotes. We moved, slowly and carefully, in the direction that we had last heard the coyotes. A mixture of stealth to find the animals and fear of the unknown. After cruising for about 50 yards, I heard Matt stumble, swear, and fall to the ground, clattering over his plate carrier. I shined my light towards him, and as I looked at what he had stumbled on, the stench or rotting meat and like a dry sewage smell wafted into my nose so that I was doubled over, ready to puke. With hands on my knees and my rifle hanging from its one-point sling, I looked up and saw that my friend had stumbled over a huge deer carcass. He was sitting on his ass, just staring at the carcass wide-eyed. I immediately looked up and shouldered my rifle, looking for the coyotes, but they didn't seem to be around. I went over to help Matt up, but when I got over to him, he was still staring wide-eyed at the corpse. My view of the body had been from behind, so I didn't see much, just a large deer. But from this side, I could see the horror of the animal. The animal looked both decayed and mutated. The hind legs were huge and muscular, strangely elongated. The chest and body were horribly mutilated, the intestines hanging out like its stomach had been pulled out. The head was the most decayed. I could see the skull in parts and the eyelids had been torn off. The 12-pointed antlers had moss growing all over them. But the worst part was the forelegs. They were long and slender and ended in clawed hands. I stared at the creature for a good 5 seconds before I felt the same crushing presence that I had felt the night before. And as I looked around to identify the source, I realized that the entire forest was silent. I have never felt fear like I did in that moment, and thankfully, fight or flight screamed at me to fly. I grabbed Matt by the back of his plate carrier and pulled him to his feet and pushed him back towards camp, screaming at him to run. I looked back then, scanning around with my light. When it settled on the corpse, it was moving. I reacted purely out of fear, firing several rounds from my AR. I couldn't hear anything after that due to the deafening thunder from the rifle. I dropped my flashlight in the chaos, but the light from my muzzle showed me all I needed to see to grab my friends back at camp and rush them back to the cars. The first I remember, imprinted like a photograph in my mind, is the corpse laying on its stomach, unlike on its side when we had found it. The second is the body resting on its forearms, the head rolling limply from the shoulders. And finally, the creature standing on its hind legs, using its clawed hands to stuff its innards back into its belly. The horrible eyes staring at me with a supernatural fire, burning with hunger. I was in tears from fear when we made it to the camp. I have no idea if any of my rounds connected. I don't know what I said or what was said by the rest of my friends when we made it into camp, but I got them out of camp and into the cars. We just drove and drove until we got to a nearby gas station which was still open. I grabbed a monster and drank it and tried to process what I had seen. There is only one thing it could have been. A true Wendigo. Sixth story. I promised my second-born child to a demon. I'll admit this was a very stupid thing to do. I thought I was being clever. This whole mess started a few years ago when I got the news my boys couldn't swim. My wife and I were heartbroken. We talked about having kids on our first date. She wanted 4. I wanted 2. We compromised and decided to have 4. We tried for our first, but it was taking a while. I told her not to worry, said we should be patient. But time dragged on and on. She made an appointment with a fertility specialist. Turned out I was the problem. The doctor was great. She explained all our options. I'll avoid the grisly details, but it was easy for me. My grand contribution was filling a cup, but my wife had to endure all sorts of injections and procedures. Skip ahead 2 years, and we've still got no baby, just unpaid bills. We talked about it and agreed to pull the plug. I resigned myself to never becoming a father. Until I had my bright idea. That is, I started reading books. The kind of books you wouldn't find in a library. The kind you wouldn't let a pastor catch you reading. Those kind of books. The ritual seemed straightforward enough. Light some candles, utter an incantation, then hash out the deal. My wife was raised Catholic, so I kept it a secret. One evening, while she was away, I performed the ceremony. The demon had one giant eye, sharp teeth, and a 3-piece suit. It spoke in an odd formal manner. I explained my dilemma. All I wanted was to have a child. Just one was enough. The demon said that wasn't a problem and asked what I had to offer. When I inquired whether demons accepted houses behind on their mortgage payments, it said no. It suggested my second-born child. I asked what happens if I only had the one, and it said the deal would be null and void. We shook on it. There was a gust of wind, a moment of complete darkness, then it was gone. I was excited. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought some roses, my wife's favorite, and had a romantic dinner ready when she got back. I didn't want to waste any time. A week later, when she was in the mood, we got down to business. Soon she was showing the early signs of pregnancy. We picked up a test and jumped for joy when we got the result. Now it was time to put my plan into action and have a vasectomy. The demon couldn't have my second-born child if I never had one. I booked an appointment and thought that was the end of it. Until today, the 12-week ultrasound scan. At first, I was beside myself with excitement. Then it happened. "You see that blob on the left?" said the doctor. "That's the head." My eyes welled up with tears. "Incredible. And you see that blob on the right?" "I do. That's the other head." You mean Dash? Congratulations, you're having twins." Seventh story. I helped a Wendigo, and I regret it all. When this happened, I was living in a small town with lots of forest nearby. It was small, and everybody was friendly with each other, living in an area where everyone knows everyone. My ma and pa didn't really take stranger danger seriously. Don't hop in a stranger's van, don't take candy from people you don't know well, is the most I was told. Being young at the time I was taught this, I wasn't told why. I wasn't told of how monstrous humans could truly be. In my innocent mind, I saw no reasons for a person to want to hurt others. I believe this for most other creatures too. I wasn't afraid of animals or insects. So, it was no surprise that this would have happened. Seeing how stupid I was. It was in early spring, and I was going for a usual walk through the neighborhood and into the local woods. Admiring the flowers and listening to the birds' calls, I was drawn further into the darkness that was that fucking forest. Soon, I didn't even know where I was. The trees weren't familiar. I was deeper into the woods than I'd gone before. And just before I traced my steps back home, I heard something. "Help." The voice was dry, raspy, and quiet. It sounded strained, like whoever was speaking felt pain to do so. I turned back, trying to find out who or what was calling for me, although my innocent mind was certain it was a person. "Over here." I followed the voice and soon found the creature in front of me. Its long limbs wrapped in the thorny brambles it was trapped in, its face covered by its long, blood-soaked hair. "Please, help me, child." Despite what I wanted to do, my gut told me not to go closer to it. It was dangerous. I ignored the feeling, As I tried to remove the brambles from the creature's body, I only succeeded in cutting my hands. "I can't get you out," I sadly told the creature. "Try harder. You don't want me to die here, do you?" It shook its head, removing the few vines I'd managed to pull off its antlers. "Of course I don't want you to die." I then remembered my mother's pruning shears. I'd seen her use them to cut plants before, so they should work, right? "It'll be right back. I can get some tools to cut you free." As I got up to leave, it grabbed my leg. "Don't go. I'll be lonely. We can free me later." The creature pulled me back down to the ground. I stared at it again, noticing all the bones poking through its skin. That's all it really was. Skin and bones. Breaking the eerie silence, it spoke again. "My name is Inoki. What is yours?" I didn't hesitate to respond. "I'm T." After that, we started to talk more. Until the sun started going down, then I went home. That night I stayed awake in bed, wondering about my new friend. How did he get stuck there, anyway? The next day, I brought the pruning shears, and with some effort, I removed the brambles. Inoki never thanked me for the help. He just tried to stand up, but he was too wounded to move. I innocently asked, "Do you want me to go get my parents? They have Band-Aids." But he shook his head. "I need more than that. I need food to get stronger." And so, I ran home and got some food, mostly biscuits and some bread. "I can't eat that." He turned away from the food in disgust. "What do you eat then?" He looked around and then pointed at a small bird. It had gotten tangled in the nearby brambles. It was thrashing around, trying to get free. "Go get that for me." I remember feeling scared in that moment. I loved birds. Whenever I found a wounded one, I'd try to take care of it before my pa would take it to the vet, while secretly just putting it down. But without even realizing what I was doing, I'd already removed the bird from the brambles. I watched in horror as Inoki ate the poor thing. He didn't seem to like it, but he did anyway. I kept visiting him every day, bringing him more birds or other poor animals for weeks. He was looking better each day, yet still bone-thin, until eventually I came to him with another bird. He wasn't sitting in the place he always sat. I called out for him, but he didn't come. Then I heard the trees above me shake. I looked up, just in time to run as it jumped down and chased after me. It caught up to me in no time. It had longer legs and was faster, and it grabbed my leg, and its claws sunk into me. I screamed and screamed until half of the local neighborhood came running into the woods. One or two even had guns, but Inoki got away before he could be killed. I never set foot into the woods again. After I was patched up and told my story to the local newspaper, I was told about what Inoki really was. A Wendigo. I was told I was goddamn lucky to have gotten away, but stupid to have even helped him. My parents moved away after that, and I was properly taught about stranger danger. Eighth story. House of Ghouls. A guy who bought an old house, he was excited to have a new home. He arrived at his house and said, "I love this new home," and put his objects and furniture there. But that night there was a scream. He was having a nice dream about flowers and hot, sexy women, so he was awoke with a fright. So he went upstairs to investigate because this where scream came from, but then he was attacked by ghouls, ghosts, and goblins who tried to take him away. "Oh, my hod knew," he yelled and ran out into the night and into his car and drove off. He never returned to that house, and he died a month later. He died when he was taken to a hospital compiling about bad dream and not sleeping well. They tried to get him to well, but they cold not, and he was the dead. Then a photo was taken of his body at the point of death while there was nobody in the room, and it showed a figure over his body. The hospital staff were shocked at this, so analyzed it, and with some cleaning up of the photo, it was shown that the figure was of the same man. This was caused a huge shock, and it was reported to professional expert people to try and find the meaning of this mystery so it could be solved. But that night the hospital he died at later burned to the ground. Later my friends have they had a photo taken in front of an old house. They were doing this for Halloween because it is a scary old house, and people do not go there, and if you ask for direction to it no one will tell you. They used an old camera because they wanted to set the mood and make more creepy. They lined up against the house near a darkened window. They tired to take photo, but the camera broke, and there was a blood-curdling scream and more screams. They tried to recover the photos by printing them, but the only file that was recovered was of the photo in font of the house, and in the house there was glowing blood-red eyes that chills the soul. People did like to look at the photo, and those that looks it would have nightmares. Evil whispers would come from the photo at night, and it had to be locked in a room so that none could be bothered by it. Then the photo later caught fire and was destroyed. We think that house was the same house that man went to and was chased out by those monstrous creatures, and none of my friends will go back there in case they might see those eyes against and heard that cream that haunts the mind and soul. We should have listened to that crazy old man who told us not to go near there 'cause it is a bad house and is not very good. Ninth story. The Black Woods. It's hard to put into words what I've been through, what I've seen. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get over what happened February 25th. February 25th. It was to be a fun day out in the woods roughing it with the guys, but it changed so quickly, so abruptly I haven't had time to feel. The guys and I were finally able to all get some time off work for this camping and hunting trip we had been planning since our freshman year. All of us had planned this for months in advance and had been prepping everything we were gonna need. I was to bring all the lighting equipment and tents, Christian the food and water, Bobby the fishing rods and rifles, and Nick the rifles and ammunition. Oh God, Nick, what happened to you? The night we set out to our campground was like any other, dark, but the sky was filled with stars, my favorite part of being out there. We set up camp just as the sun was setting and started unrolling our sleeping bags. We were all exhausted from the drive and ready to crash. Nick wanted to sleep with his rifle, like he always does. He said it made him feel safer. I always thought that was bogus, and he just had some weird connection to rifles. The four of us all had our own tents, and I quickly dozed off. I awoke what felt like to me an hour later to Christian climbing into my tent with the whitest face I've ever seen on anyone. I asked him what was wrong, and he said that he heard something that freaked him out, so he came to see if I was awake. I got up and stepped outside my tent to look around and see what was up. I looked in the others' tents, but they weren't there, and Nick had left his rifle, which is really unlike him. I called Christian out, and he said that he didn't notice that they were missing when he crawled into my tent. Up until this point, I had just been thinking that Christian had been freaking out because the blackness of the woods was getting to him. Now I was beginning to worry. I grabbed my flashlight from my tent and told Christian that we should go looking around a little bit because there's no reason that the other two would have set out this early without us. Now Christian may act the most cowardly of all of us, but he just does a poor job of hiding it. I am easily the most terrified of trekking around the woods while it's pitch dark. I just compose myself better. We head off in the direction of Polaris because what the hell, at least we can follow that back if we get lost. As we're walking, Christian is behind me, and I can hear him stepping on leaves and twigs as we walk so that I know that he's behind me. Every so often I stop to look around a little bit, and so does his crunching. However, after about the fourth time, Christian's footsteps don't pick back up with me. As soon as I realize I can't hear him anymore, I whip the flashlight around to see nothing but blackness and woods for what seems like forever. The only other sounds are the crickets humming as I frantically spin around to see if I just missed him. I call his name, but to no avail. I start running in what I think is the way we came. I can't find the campsite anywhere. My flashlight battery is starting to fade. The crickets are getting louder. As I'm freaking the out and spinning around, I see what looks like Bobby leaning up against a tree, only I can only see the back of his arm and his legs extending in front of him. I yell his name, but he doesn't respond, so I run over and grab his arm just as I realize that Bobby's skin is ice cold and his skin and clothes are covered in a slight dew.
Shock?
Absolute fucking shock. Like a bolt of lightning, I realize that my friend since college is just a corpse in the woods. His head rolled to one side and his eyes lifeless and distant. I back away and fall against another tree, panting and unable to come to terms with what could possibly have done this. I knew that he knew better and wouldn't just sit out here and freeze to death. As I was sitting there trying to wrap my head around this, I realized that the sound of the crickets had stopped. I looked up, and where there was once stars and planets was now only dark. The moon wasn't even out anymore. What happened next took me a good long time for me to write. As the last little bit of my battery life faded, I heard the slight cracking of leaves as someone was approaching. Before I could react, Nick had appeared before me. Tall and silent, he looked at me with the most blank of expressions on his face. I screamed his name and asked him what had happened and where it had been. So glad to see one of my friends, but also petrified to see him. He just looked at me, raised his finger to his lips, and shushed me. Don't worry, he said in the most monotone, yet serene voice. He won't harm you and I. What the fuck are you talking about, Nick? I screamed. This felt wrong. There was no sound but my heavy breathing and Nick's voice. Come and meet him. His name is Indrid Cold. I felt ice go down my spine. I needed to get out of there. I turned and ran like I've never ran in my entire life. I just kept running for what seemed forever. By some miracle, I found our Jeep. By an even greater miracle, I was the one entrusted with the keys. By the time I got to where there was cell phone service to call the authorities, the sun was coming up. The Rangers told me that they found our campsite and Bobby 3 miles away. They ruled his cause of death as exposure. Nick and Christian still haven't been found, and it's been almost 4 days. I still can't believe that still happened. 10th story. I'm looking for an expert in Mexican folklore. I am writing this looking for folklore help, in particular anyone who knows anything about Mexican legends. Google does not seem to cut it, as I just get a few Wikipedia and blog links that are extremely shallow and are not applicable to my situation. In particular, I'm looking for information about La Pelona. My mother and grandparents are Mexican, and I had heard a lot of stories, even though I grew up in America, about La Llorona and El Nahual, and even that chupacabras thing, although I think it started in Puerto Rico. But I had never heard about La Pelona. What I do know is that whatever she is real. It all started a few years ago when I got a chance to travel along the south of Mexico and spend a week with relatives in their rancho. During the day, I would take an hour-long bus, ride to one of the many nearby historic towns, and eat and drink and walk around like a tourist taking photos. Usually by sundown, I would be full and drunk, so I could sleep on the bus ride back to the ranch. After a few days of this, I was feeling worn out and decided to actually explore the small town I was staying in. Downtown was just a couple of blocks around a big church and a plaza, but in every direction, if you walked a little, you made it into the monte, surrounded by brush, crooked trees, and a few barrel cactus. By noon, I was feeling dehydrated, so I started looking for a garden, hose to drink from, or a corner store where I could buy a bottle of water. I saw a bunch of kids who were laughing and playing around a tree, so I asked them where I could get something to drink. One of them offered me a sip from a big plastic cup, but I politely declined. "Ale," she insisted, so I took a big greedy gulp, and it was an agua fresca with pineapple chunks, although I swear it tasted alcoholic, like Tepach. I asked her where she got it, but she pretty much interrupted my last syllable by asking in Spanish, "Do you want to play with La Pelona?" I saw she had a naked Barbie doll in her hand, and it was worn and warped, with its hair completely burnt off. Pelona basically is female and bald, so I chuckled a little, wondering why the child had done this to her doll. "No thank you," I said, and offered the kids a few pesos. "Ale," the child said as the other kids giggled. "My doll just wants to sit in the tree. That's where La Pelona lives." I figured it was harmless fun, so I gently took the doll from her and moved a branch aside with my arm, so I could sit her on a horizontal branch that swooped low like a hammock. As soon as I moved the leaves, I realized I was face to face with something small, pale, and wrinkled, like one of those hairless cats. The kids started to laugh and rushed towards me, so I looked down at them for a second. Then I looked back up and got a good look at La Pelona, who was some sort of balding old woman, barely a foot tall, with sagging breasts and long cat-like claws. She was naked, covered in wrinkles and blood-red dots like chickenpox. Whatever little hair she had on her head fell in little wisps of white, one of them covering part of her cat-like eyes. "Pendejo," she cackled at me, calling me an idiot. The kids held me as La Pelona jumped from the branch and dug her claws into my scalp, making a hissing, growling noise. I wrestled with the creature that clawed at my scalp, keeping it away from my eyes, while the children laughed and punched me in the stomach and groin, screaming, "Pendejo, idiota," and other words for stupid. I was able to tear the thing off me and throw it against the tree, where it landed effortlessly and scampered up. I'm ashamed to admit I punched one of the children in the face and broke free. I kept running, stumbling, and trying not to throw up from the exertion and fear. When I finally made it to my relative's place, I realized I was still holding the burnt and bald Barbie doll, so I threw it over the fence and vomited hard until I had tears in my bloodshot eyes. I told my relatives what happened as they disinfected the scratches on my scalp and rubbed a little Vicks VapoRub on them for God knows what reason other than making them sting. I told them I was attacked by children and some sort of goblin. No, Pendejo, it was a cat, they corrected me. Idiota, chuckled my cousins. You are scared of a cat, how stupid. Leave your window open tonight, so you and the kitty can become friends, one said. In that moment I realized they had the exact same attitude as the kids, taunting and cruel, so I grabbed my bags and took the next bus out of town. My parents wired me some money and I spent my next 2 nights at a hotel in a tourist town, unable to sleep at night from fear and the itchy pain I felt in the stitches I got at a clinic. Then I caught my flight home. 2 years later, I've decided to finally give in and look for information about what happened to me, with little to no success. I tried to forget, to imagine I was dehydrated and got attacked by a cat, but the memory is way too vivid. I can see her clearly when I close my eyes. Also, I've gotten scratches from a cat before, and they healed right up. Not these. I have to shave my head now since my hair grows in patches, completely avoiding the pale scars, La Pelona, left behind. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.